You touch on something that is really critical too. So Peter had to leave behind his source of income. He left his
Yeah.
his family and the other guys who were who's
Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. Now, let me ask you a question. As a man, do you feel empowered or disempowered these days? Do life struggles leave you wondering what's next? Now, I can't speak for you, but I got to tell you, there are a lot of days I wonder. So let's meet today's guest and see if we can learn more about what to do. So, welcome to the True Man Podcast, Mike Hatch. Now, Mike is the host of the Empowered Manhood Podcast, and he helps men rediscover courageous masculinity and the importance of building authentic brotherhood. And he's got a new book out called Manhood Empowered by the Light of the Gospel. Love that. Mike, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Mike, thank you so much for having me, brother. And that was, man, well done. I have to say, not many, you must have edited that intro, pulled different things. Like, good job. That was incredible.
Well,
You're
I
a
did.
pro.
And I will tell you that what I really appreciate is that your name is Mike Hatch and not Mike blah, blah, because I just butcher people's names. It's brutal, but I've come to wear that as a badge of honor for starting the podcast. So I lucked out there today.
That's great, man. It is so good to be with you, Mike. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. Now, Mike, becoming an empowered man, what a topic. Typically, we were just laughing about this actually. Typically, this comes from learning some lessons in life. So sorry, dudes, that's just how this thing works, apparently. So what got you started down this road of empowerment? Talk about your story behind that.
Oh, man. So I am a recovering pornography addict. So I'm going to put that out there right off the bat. And I discovered, unfortunately, early on that I was very disempowered because I was walking in the light, or excuse me, walking in the dark. I was walking in the dark, not in the light. And as I did that growing up, I grew up in a broken family. Like most people, everybody's family has some, rough edges to some extent. And I just began to go to porn as my way of escape, the way to medicate the pain that I was experiencing in my heart. I grew up feeling very insecure. And part of that was because of big male personalities in my life and the success that they had, and me feeling like I couldn't measure up to that standard, basically. And those, my dad, my grandfather, and I might tell a little bit more stories about that, but they were big personalities. And so, so I just began to retreat into the dark. And what I talk about in the book is that, the dark used to be a place that I would avoid as a child. And I use the analogy of my grandparents' staircase that, led down into the dark cellar, And oh my goodness, it was the scariest place to go. Every time I had to go down there, it freaked me out, and I would race back up as fast as I could. But unfortunately, something changed in me, and this happens with a lot of guys, where suddenly the dark becomes a place of refuge. It becomes a place where I go to hide and engage in the behaviors that I would never engage in the light. And then that became very disempowering for me. And then I began to live out of insecurity and fear until one day, 5 months before I was married, my wife walked in on me while I was looking at porn on the computer. Actually, we were engaged at the time, and everything blew up. She threw the ring back at me. She threw 2 Bibles at me, told me I just committed adultery. and she was right. And we both worked at a church at the time. And I was also involved in a ministry called Young Life at the time as well, leading a ministry, had started a ministry, was on staff at a church. And in her mind, she thought, the people who struggle with porn are people who are, pedophiles and murderers and rapists and things like that. And she never would have equated me, her fiance, who was on staff at a church, this Christian guy that she loved, to struggle with such a thing. And so it blew up. And, but that was the moment when God pushed me forcefully into the light, out of the dark. And it was, I'll tell you, it didn't feel like it, but it was a rescue. It was a rescue. It felt like a violent intrusion, but God was throwing me a lifeline. And that is what, that's really what prompted me to, well, didn't prompt me. He really forced me into the light.
Yeah.
It was against my will.
Yeah. That's kind of talk about, you get into a situation like that initially, I'm sure, right? This hurts a little bit, right? There's a sting.
Yeah.
That's a piece of what we have to walk through. But talk about the rescue. Maybe we don't sometimes spend enough time talking about that, what that feels like, because there are guys out there right now. You know, there could be someone listening to this going, man, I need a rescue, but I got nothing. I don't know where to go get it. I don't, but what does it feel like to be rescued?
Oh, man, Mike. Whew, that's a great question. You're really good at this, man. You're really good. Okay. So, yeah. So as I was living in the dark, living in out of insecurity and fear and being disempowered, what I realized after being in the light, looking back on that, was that I really wasn't trusting God. First John chapter 1 talks about the difference between walking in the light versus walking in the dark. And one of the things that it says is that when you walk in the dark, you become a liar, and you actually make God out to be a liar. So I was living a lie. And so when I was living in the dark, I wasn't putting my full trust in God. I didn't have confidence in his faithfulness to me. And so in turn, it became all about me and my own ability to hold things together, to be in control, to gain people's approval. I was so manipulative. I was a liar because that meant everything to me. People's approval meant everything to me. The way I looked, how I performed meant everything to me. And as a result, I became about an inch deep.
Yeah. Boy, can I relate to this.
Yeah. Not much. I look back and, man, I'm ashamed at gosh, I just was not.
I just had a discussion yesterday, and we were talking about the phrase "fake it till you make it" and how wrong that is. I think Paul and I talked about that on our 100th episode. The little phrases that we buy into, right? And over the years, because I was involved in sales and that type of thing, people always say "fake it till you make it," and now, whoa, I realize the error. In that.
Well, and you break up a great point, because one of the stories I start out with in the book is I was in a restroom, because I was in the Pittsburgh International Airport.
This made me chuckle. I'm just
good. It's a lot of people chuckle. Yeah, I would bring I worked at the tie rack. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that.
I actually recall that.
All right, good. Yeah, not many people. Where I sold neckties and pashminas.
What's a necktie, right?
And I would bring my lunch in Tupperware containers, and then when I was done eating, I'd take it to the restroom and rinse it out, because otherwise, if it stayed in there, it'd just get nasty. So I just like to do that. I was in the restroom washing this Tupperware container out, and I noticed that the person who was in the stall behind me walked out very quickly without washing their hands. And it just stood out to me. I'm like, why would you? And I didn't really look, because I'm busy. And I just felt this person, walk behind me and out the door quickly. And why wouldn't you wash that's just gross. I'm big on that, And then I hear chuckling on the other side. So in the Pittsburgh International Airport, there are two sides to the bathrooms, and it's divided by a big wall with sinks on each side. On one side of the restroom, there are urinals. On the other side, there are stalls. And I was on the stall side, and I heard this cackling, I guess I could describe it as, on the other side. And so I peeked around the wall of sinks, and I saw like 3 or 4 women on the other side laughing, talking to each other, and pointing at me. And of course, my first thought was, wow, how embarrassing. Those women are in the men's restroom. And then, of course, the weight of the situation fell on me, and I realized, oh, no, I am in the women's restroom. And man, I froze. I stood there in front of the mirror and just, what was I going to do? And then all of a sudden it hit me, the person behind me, who, no wonder they left the stall without washing their hands. It was a woman. So, and by the way, I know, unfortunately today, these are this is very, how do I say, this is very controversial to say these things, that this was a woman, but it was. And she walked out quickly, of course, because she walked out and she saw me. And so I thought, man, what do I do? How do I get out of this alive? Like, am I going to get in trouble? And I was just frozen. And so I just decided, you know what? The only thing I can do at this point, I'm gonna pretend like I own the place, and I'm gonna walk out, head held high, chest out. And I did. I walked right out. I pretended I didn't even see the women on the other side still laughing and pointing at me. I think maybe a couple women walked in, as I was walking out, and I don't even think they looked twice at me, because I think I fooled them by my false confidence. But man, that described me to a T. That moment is exactly who I was as I was walking in the dark, pretending like I own the place, but living out of deep fear and insecurity. And it wasn't until I got to experience God's grace in the light. Because often if we're walking in the dark, we don't get to experience God's grace. We don't get to experience his all sufficiency, his faithfulness to us. But by God pushing me into the light, yes, I was exposed, embarrassed. Our families found out. Our church found out. It was mortifying to me. Everything that I was most ashamed of and had been hiding for most of my life had come spilling out. And however, in that moment, I also, through the church, through God's word, through men rallying around me, I experienced the unconditional covering and grace of Jesus. And that absolutely transformed me, because all of a sudden, wow, I can trust him. Holy cow, yeah. I can. And then that became my motivation to continue to walk in the light, to experience God's grace afresh every day. And so, yeah, I guess that's how it answers. It's the walking in the light.
Yeah, it's just a weight lifted.
It is. Yes, that's exactly right. It is a weight lifted. But it's also a continual process. We have to live out every day, because as men, we want so badly to do it ourselves, accomplish these things, be a success, take all the credit, and have everybody admire and love us and respect us. That's huge.
Well, I'm always reminded of that C.S. Lewis quote, and I'm not going to quote it. I'm more or less going to paraphrase here, because every day is like starting over again. The quote goes something like that. And basically what C.S. Lewis was referring to is this battle that we wage in life between, light and dark. And yes. What I've come to understand, and I didn't fully understand this, is that there are just a lot of men walking around that don't understand that there's a spiritual battle going on. Yeah. They think the battle's with themselves. Right.
Yeah.
And talk about that a little bit, because I think I'm finding this is an important thing to talk about, because so many guys don't know that there's this battle that exists, because the church doesn't always talk about this in the way probably you and I may talk about it in more intimate circles. Right. The church doesn't always. Well, they pretty it up, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to say it?
I think it's a good way of saying it. They pretty it up. They kind of stay at a shallow level, because I think often the pastors, and I'm a pastor, former men's pastor at a large church here in Pittsburgh. And so I know when you're thinking about your message, you've got so many people to consider, and you're trying to help apply that scripture to so many different types of people. And so on one hand, I do understand the tension there that pastors and churches face with that. However, at the same time, there are things like this that can be put on the back burner for extended periods of time. And the more we take these struggles that men are dealing with on an everyday basis that you just touched on, and when we don't talk about it, it's like keeping it in the dark, and that's where it festers. That's where the mold grows, and it just begins to be more and more corrupt and corrupting. And so we definitely need to, the church needs to talk about it for sure. And unfortunately, by not talking about it, men feel more isolated and alone.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it becomes that whole idea of, oh, I thought it was just me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because we don't want to talk about it. certain things. I mean,
Yep.
I would go as far to say we won't talk about our children or our wives or what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong. And that sounds pretty basic in nature, and to some degree it is, but
Yeah.
it's kind of critical.
Yeah.
To having a happy life.
Right. We all show up to church in our Sunday best and put on that show, if in a sense.
Yeah.
And I realize that there are some very genuine people in church, so please don't be offended by what I said. But by and large, we show up and we put a show on at church, and it's really hard to tell on a Sunday morning who's broken and who's not.
Yeah.
It really is hard. And that, I think that's terrible, because that's what being in the kingdom of God is about. We are broken. All of us, every single one of us. The whole reason we come to church is because of our own sin and need for a savior, need for healing. But you would never guess it on a Sunday morning,
Yeah. I mean, because everybody's fine. I'm fine. How's it going? I'm fine. Fine. Yeah. Hey, we'll see you next Sunday. I'm fine. Yeah. And that's not a knock, right? I mean, but I mean, nobody's, or rarely somebody going to pull you aside in the hallway and go, so I'm not so fine. I got some, as Rocky says, I got some stuff going on in the basement down here. Yeah, and right. I mean, that's right. I mean, said nobody in a church, probably, right?
Well, it's interesting though, as a pastor, you would be surprised at what pastors experience. Well, so I've had guys walk up to me and say, "Hey, Mike, I don't know how to be a husband." And he says this to me in the lobby, as I'm sitting there. Like, that's a big question.
Yeah, timing is everything, right?
Yeah, right.
Can you get on my calendar, please?
Right. Exactly. But we need to bring this kind of stuff into the light, to have these conversations and give men a place to be real and let down their defenses, and discover through that process God's all sufficiency and his faithfulness to us. It will absolutely change you.
Now, you've taken on the mantle, I would say, of trying to work with men, and you've got this wonderful new book now. How would you suggest we help the deficiency in the church, right? I've been down this road where there's this, you try to get a men's group going in a church, and half the guys go, well, I want to do this, and the other half say it needs to be a Bible study, and you got this yin and yang. The best success I found actually is, to some degree, outside the church walls, where sometimes people feel much more comfortable in their discussions. Yeah. But what can we do? Because masculinity, man. Listen. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's under attack. You don't have to watch the news for 10 minutes to understand that. Or
right.
I'll leave it at that.
No, that's a great question. I think part of the reason why I wrote this book, that I say this, is that I really wanted to help complacent Christian men avoid a life of inconsequence. And the way that we do this is that we put our faith in ourselves. So our culture has so much impact on us and influence on us that would say, no, you have the answer within you, or just work hard enough, hustle, grind, and you'll get there. And unfortunately, when it comes to our relationship with Christ, and it doesn't work that way. It's actually quite opposite, what I've found. And I describe this in the book in three main points. I say that the empowered man, that I call empowered man, is a man who's known by God, grown by God, and owned by God.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's good.
So being known, those three pieces have been huge for me. So over 20 years of discipleship that I've done with men, this is the based on my own story, but then also teasing out some of the themes that I've seen among men and what's worked and what hasn't. Is the first step is understanding that you are known by God. Well, first of all, if you've come to faith and you've trusted Christ as your savior, and you've got the Holy Spirit dwelling in you now is a deposit for your eternal salvation, then you are known by God. So I grew up in, like I said, big male personalities, and my grandfather was a rags to riches story in the coal mines of West Virginia, the Ohio Valley. So he started as a clerk, worked his way up to becoming the vice president of Consol Coal Company, which is now Consolidated Energy or Consol Energy, I think. And he was also president of Hanna Coal, a division of Consol at the time. And he had a tremendous impact on safety in the mining industry. So much so that, I mean, there were governors that said people's lives, are due to his work in mine safety, the fact that people haven't died. And so he had a tremendous impact. And I just remember growing up in close to where he was, obviously where he lived, and everybody knew my grandpa, everybody, and everybody absolutely adored him and talked about how grateful they were for all the work he did to save, their sons, husbands, daughters, and kept them safe in the mine. And it's interesting. So my grandfather obviously loved these miners. He cared very much for them because he worked so hard to protect them and create mine safety.
Sure.
But his love for them was different than his love for me, his grandson. Okay. He obviously loved them. He loved me, but I had a unique position to him. I am carrying on the Hatch name, if you will. I am the firstborn male, I think, in our family, and so there's a unique thing there. But I had a unique relationship with my grandma and my grandpa, where I could stay over at their house, right? And we spent weeks together over there. I'd get to wake up early in the morning and smell the coffee in the kitchen, come down and jump on my grandpa's lap, and he'd say, "Michelangelo, it's so good this morning," He would take me on trips, and we do amazing things and adventures and things together. He loved me in a very different way than he loved those miners. And the difference was I was his grandson. I had positionally, I have a unique position in his life and family. And it's similar with our relationship with God. God loves all of us. However, when you trust in Christ and you are saved through his grace and his grace alone, you enter into the family of God and become positionally in a very unique relationship with God. It's said that all people are God's children, and there's some truth to that, but it's not the whole truth, because yes, God loves everybody, but if you are in Christ, man, you have a very unique position as an adopted son of God that can't be compared to others who haven't taken that step of faith to trust Christ. And in fact, Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians. He talks about the difference between the knowledge that we gain being compared to knowing that God knows us. It's a really interesting comparison that he draws. And so there's something really significant about our identity, who we are, because God knows us. And there's a security and a confidence that grows out of it as you lean more into that identity.
And it's so important because the reality is we all want to be seen or heard. Yeah. And God says you are.
That's right.
That's right. If you choose to seek it, I think is probably how I would say that.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And then, so being grown by God this is probably one of the hardest things for us as men to grasp, because we want to take control of our own self-improvement plan, our own character development. It doesn't work like that. When you have the Holy Spirit, Philippians 2:13 said is for God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. So it's actually God takes responsibility for your character development plan. Not that you don't do anything. There are definitely things that we must do as men, but it's got to start with God working in and through us to change us and grow us. I had a kid in my Young Life. I was on staff with Young Life in Chicago for a while, and his name is, well, I don't use his real name. I love him to death. His name is Chris. Great guy. He grew up with a stuttering problem, and it absolutely paralyzed him for most of his young life. Sure. And we brought him to Young Life camp, on several occasions. And I'll never forget the first time we took him, he would not say anything. And when I mean he didn't say anything, I mean, I probably heard 1 or 2 words the entire week we were at camp. He may have spoken to some of his friends, but he did not talk to me at all. And then fast forward, actually, a couple of years later, he came to camp again and came to faith and embraced the gospel. And then it was interesting. He started reading the Bible on the bus ride home from the camp. And I kind of learned some of this after the fact, after talking to Mike, but he started reading the Bible. And then as we would meet in the Bible studies in Young Life, I started noticing something. Mike began to speak with great confidence, but it was God's word that was coming out of him.
Yeah.
It was the most miraculous thing I've ever seen. So he started reading the Bible every day, and the Holy Spirit gripped his heart and began to give him words to speak that he didn't have. And then all of a sudden his stuttering problem went away, and his confidence came from God's word and from that Holy Spirit who was working in him. And it wasn't his own self-improvement plan. He wasn't. It's so funny. God drew him into his word, and he just started reading the Bible, and this had this dramatic effect on him. And it was incredible.
It's funny you would say that. We were talking right before the podcast, and I was telling you just how the confidence shift that occurred in me by doing the podcast. And I think that really stems from, that closeness with God, and that realization that, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to trust that it's coming through you, and I'm not going to grip the wheel so tight on this one. It's only because I've been grown by God and had that relationship that this thing works.
Yeah.
Either that, or I was born to sit behind a microphone, but I don't see, I don't know.
Well, I think there is truth to that though, Mike, because God created you a certain way. And part of it is learning who he created us to be. When we're in the light, we get to see more of who we are, good, bad, and indifferent. Yeah. And we also get to know God better. But it's like God is cultivating and drawing out of you the ways that he uniquely made you to make an impact in his kingdom. And that is, and the longer we walk in a relationship with God, and I love how you use this in your podcast, is this intimate relationship with God. It's a close relationship. Like I mentioned with my grandfather, very, very similar, right?
Yeah.
And as you do that, you get to know yourself better, and you get to you learn how to leverage those gifts that God gave you for his kingdom's sake. And yeah, and that brings me to the last point. I just finished with this, is that owned by God, because what happens is eventually, as God grows us, we begin to submit our will to his. Suddenly, our plan is not as important as his bigger kingdom plan, what he's up to. And as we entrust ourselves into his will and what he's trying to accomplish, I think, like what you've done, Mike, you discover how your gifts, how he created you already ahead of time to lend yourself to that mission that he's calling you to. And I think of the story I use in the book is the woman at the well. And I love this story. Oh my goodness. This is one of my favorite, where Jesus talks with this woman, and she's not a woman of good repute. She's gotten around. She's got quite a reputation. And so she's coming to the well at the hottest time of the day in order to avoid being seen by other people and be ridiculed, etc. However, she meets Jesus there, and Jesus starts interacting with her, and she slips this tiniest, edge of her toenail into the light. This is what I love about it. I mean, so Jesus says, "Hey, go call your husband and come back." And all she says, and some theologians would say she was actually deceptive in what she said next, is she said, "I have no husband." And that was all she said. And it was just a sliver of the truth that she stuck into the light. And it's amazing what Jesus did. He said, "You're right." Very, very encouraging. "You're right. You don't have, in fact, you've had 5 husbands, and the one you're living with now is not your husband. What you've said is quite true." And so he actually encourages her with the tiniest sliver of that she was willing to put out, the littlest bit, that mustard seed of faith. That's it in practice right there. And so Jesus takes that, encourages her with it. And then as they begin to, continue to talk, eventually God uses her to impact the entire town that she was coming from. And she leaves her water jar behind, and she races back to the town when she finds out that he's the Messiah, to the very people that she had been avoiding for most of her life and had suffered ridicule and disdain from, to tell them about Christ and what God was doing through him as the Messiah. I mean, that's someone who is owned by God. No longer their will is not their own, and they are on a mission for him. And that's what happens in us as well, as we are grown by God, that he begins to, we begin to entrust ourselves to his will. And I think these are the things that, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but much of our churches, many ministries, a lot of men's, unfortunately, ministries and men's books, they do what Jesus said the Pharisees do. They heap heavy burdens on men by making it about a works-based approach to faith, which doesn't exist. In fact, that's kind of a misnomer. You can't. So the idea is work hard enough. Like I said before, hustle and grind. You have it within you. I found that I don't have it within me. I am sinful. I am, in fact, evil. Evil is the word Jesus uses for us. We're evil. I'm evil. I need God, who is without, to then come and reside in me and empower me. That's where the power comes from, to live in confidence and encourage.
And that's precisely why I think it's a big deal that you and I are in this fight, because we are evil. But I don't want to go to church on Sunday and hear that in particular.
That's right.
I'm at a point where it's like, okay, got it. Yeah. All right. I'm good. What I want to hear is, help me fight. Help me win that battle. I think that's what, in my experience, guys want to hear. And that's why I think in a lot of the men's groups that I'm a part of, that, these are the discussions we have. This is what's going on. And, it may be a discussion around, I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah.
What do you do? And that there's so much power in that.
Yes.
And it's why, I so encourage, getting in men's small group and getting away and having these discussions, because they're hard to have on a Sunday.
Right. But and that's walking in the light. What you just described is, because someone at some point within that group has to have faith enough in the all sufficiency of Christ, and believe that their sin doesn't define them enough to just stick that little bit out in the light and say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. And then it's amazing to see how it draws everybody into the light, because that's 1 John chapter 1. It says, if you walk in the light as he is in the light, you have fellowship with one another. Why? Why do we have fellowship with one another when we're in the light? Because we know each other. All of a sudden, you see the warts, you see my crooked teeth, you see the stuff that's, again, good, bad, and indifferent about me. And it draws other people out as well, because they see, okay, well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. And then they discover God's grace in the light. And then, again, that's an act of faith, stepping into the light, which is why it says after that if you walk in the light as he is in the light, you will have fellowship with one another. And then it says, and the blood of Jesus, his son, will purify you from all unrighteousness. So it's by that act of walking in the light, getting together with other guys, like you just mentioned, that is huge, huge, where you guys can walk in the light together, be really known, and experience God's grace there in the light. And then you're right. Then I think the talk in terms of how to overcome these battles, how to win in these battles, that becomes so relevant.
Yeah, it's a total fight. I mean, a lot of guys, that they, just take sports, for example, when you are involved in any athletic endeavor, especially doesn't necessarily need to be a team endeavor, but it's a good one to talk about. you've got some kind of game plan going on, or you're watching game film, and maybe you played in a game and you're watching the game film after the game, and you're doing all these things to try to be successful. And why wouldn't you do that with your own life?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
I've been thinking a lot about, in fact, I'm going to circle back to something here. It's disempowering not to do that. I mean, you do it in one area, you go to your work and you put goals together, you put a game plan together. After the project's over, what went well, what didn't go well. And so we disempower ourselves, and we didn't do this initially, and maybe we should do this because you talk about this definition in the book. For those that maybe aren't familiar with the term disempowered, talk about, they've experienced it, but maybe they don't use that term. What does disempowered mean specifically?
Yeah, it's great. So first of all, empowered or power obviously has to do with having agency, being able to affect change, being able to influence in some way, whether it be people or circumstances or situations. And to be disempowered means to have that sense of agency stripped from you. So you do not feel that you have that sense of agency to affect change in your life or in your family or in your marriage. And then unfortunately, as a result of that, what happens is we then resign ourselves to the dark. And we so many men, oh my gosh, I know so many men who've just given up on the fight, who've completely given up. And they've said, look, I've failed too many times. Clearly, I don't have the answers. I'm just going to resign myself to this and just stay in the prison that I've pretty much created for myself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what disempowerment, it means that, because I think most men, especially Christian men, because that's my primary audience. I'm trying to speak to Christian men who are feeling disempowered and complacent. And we want to have an impact for the kingdom of God. We do desperately, especially this younger generation coming up, man.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Something I'm noticing is the younger women who are from the millennial, Gen Z kind of generation now that's coming up, more and more, I'm seeing that they want men of consequence. They want men who are empowered. They've said it to me as a men's pastor over and over again, just that I want my man to be a man. I want him to be strong. I want him to be courageous. But the previous generations have actually stripped men of that in many ways through all sorts of cultural influences and things. And so you have this, like, I don't know, I can't remember if you alluded to this or not. I heard it somewhere else, but we definitely have a crisis of
it's passivity. It's passivity. And this has been handed, it's part of our DNA. It was handed down from the first Adam. It's right there in the first,
right.
You don't have to dig very deep into the Bible to go, oh, it's part of our DNA, but it's worse than that right now. I mean, it's gone beyond our DNA, and, it's a dangerous game to play. And it's something I find myself talking more about. And I hear people talking more about it, not men. Men are talking about it, but more women are talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't want a passive man. And I think, that's beginning to roll out of this whole idea of what some people have called toxic masculinity. Listen, there are bad dudes out there. I mean, there's bad everything. That's a small percentage. And, honestly, a lot of this comes from the fact that, not everybody had a grandfather like you, or a father. I mean, that's a whole other discussion where, we start talking about father wounds and fathers not being present. And, you do what you were taught.
That's right.
And, until you bang your head against the wall enough and go, it's probably not, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Or you give up and coast, which is kind of what we're talking about. And I think, people ask me all the time, Mike, what's your niche in business? Right. Because these are the business discussions you have. And I'm like, well, it's definitely Christian men. And some people look at me surprised. And I'm like, because, I can't I might be able to help atheists if they're open and willing and, they want to move on. Some Christian guys are really, I mean, if they're hard into the church, they're not going to listen to me anyway. So there's that middle road guy
Yeah.
that believes in God, but they're coasting, and they don't know why they're coasting. They don't necessarily want to coast. They just don't know how to fix it.
Yeah. I'm curious too, going back to something you said just a second ago, how many women have you heard say that they listen to your podcast? Have you had any?
Yeah. And what's interesting is I have a lot of women ask me if they can be on the podcast. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. What do you want to talk about? And I so invite that, because I love that perspective that, the reality is, right? Men and women are different. Some of the crap we go through is much the same. Maybe how we approach it's different. And I think from a communication perspective, we need to be open to listening to each other and going, I don't like this, but I like this. And but I love the diversity of thought. And listen, most men don't go around asking other women how to treat their wife or whatever the case may be. And so this becomes a platform for, hey, maybe I can give you a help for that,
Well, and I asked you that question because I've had several women tell me they listen to our podcast, and I've had a lot of women who have gotten my book and can't wait to give it to the men in their life.
Listen, I say this, I've told so many people this, Mike. I say all the time, I'm like, listen, my target audience is men, but my biggest advocates should be women.
Definitely.
I mean, I love women. Women are beautiful. Okay. I'll say that unapologetically. I love my wife. She's been incredibly successful in her career. She's been a great mom. She's been a great wife. And, women should be advocating for people like you and me.
Yeah, there's a crisis of masculine identity. And you touch on it, man. This is why I love your podcast and your ministry and what you're doing, because, what is a true man? That's a great question. So many men are asking that question. It's so funny because recently, Matt Walsh, the Daily Wire, the whole movie, What is a Woman, has come out.
Yeah.
That actually hasn't been a question until recently. However, what is a man has been an age-long question, and men have been struggling for a long time. And I think women, one of the reasons they want to listen to your podcast or read my book or listen to our podcast, I think they know what they're missing, and they know what they want, but they're still trying to kind of figure it out and put the pieces together, what that looks like. And then most men are doing the same thing, trying to figure out what does it mean to be a man.
You made me think of something, and I actually haven't had this conversation in a while. The funny thing of it is about the whole true man idea was, and when our men's small group, when we went searching for a name, and we couldn't think of a better model, right there. Can I achieve what the model did? No, but I can try to go in that direction.
That's right.
And then what's interesting about it is I would have a lot of people, and I haven't had this for a while, but people would ask me, define it. How do you define it? What is a true man? And I was actually, you were talking about the woman at the well earlier, and I couldn't help but think about the scene from The Chosen, because I love watching The Chosen, and it's such a great scene when she just goes running away from the whale, with her arms going in the air. But there's also a scene that really hit me one day as I was really trying to discern what is a true man. And it's when Simon Peter's in the boat and Jesus simply says, and I love the guy that plays Jesus in The Chosen, man. That guy is incredible. That's my Jesus right there, man. That guy is my Jesus. But he just looks at Simon Peter and goes, follow me. Follow me. And so I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I really can't define what a true man is other than those two words. I tried a million ways, and it felt like I was, Oh yeah, a man is this, that, no, a true man. I narrowed it down and I just said, no, what is the definition of a true man? A,
Mm.
a Jesus follower.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and you touch on something that is really critical too. So Peter had to leave behind his source of income. He left
Yeah.
his family, and the other guys who were who's Jesus apostles did as well,
Yeah.
to follow him. And I think that is, man, that is one of the hardest things to do, is to leave everything that we have found security in our life for most of our life, which is not always good things, to leave those behind, just like the woman at the well left the jar behind.
Yeah.
There's a lot of symbolism there with that as
Yeah.
well. And to really entrust ourselves to Christ. I think it's so
Huge.
much easier. One of the analogies I use, I had a guy come up to me in the lobby of our church once, and he was in the middle of a divorce, and he was reeling, and he said, I don't know what it means to trust God. And so I used a chair at the time, and I said, let's take this chair for a second as an illustration, as a metaphor. I can talk all day about how great this chair is, how secure it is, how it's going to hold your weight. Everybody should sit in this chair because it's amazing. But until I actually sit in it and experience the stability of it myself, I don't actually know it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think so many of us have because we've been caught up in the lies of the dark, and we believe that we can stand around Christ, if you will, and kind of point and say, hey, look how great he is, and even get approval from others in church about how much we know about God. We know so much theology, so much, we're experts in doctrine and all this other stuff. And I've seen it over and over again. A lot of men like that end up falling hard because they trust in their knowledge of God versus trusting in the fact that God knows them, and actually sitting in the seat, because that's where you'll find the stability. That is where you'll find the all-sufficiency and the faithfulness of God, and you'll experience it. Then now you're not just teaching, you're a testimony of that, and you get to share your story of how God's come through for you. Man, we have too many men today who are walking around that chair like my buddy was, who came up to me in the lobby there.
Yeah.
Didn't know what it was like to trust God.
It's tough. It takes a lot of work, and usually there's a crisis involved or a trauma of some kind. And, or do you finally just get tired of beating your head against the wall? And, but again, it's that stability of having good people around you that can help you through that, I think. And this is, my biggest fear. I've done several shows on mental health. You look at the statistics, middle-aged men are, the highest rate of suicide in the United States is middle-aged men. They're very successful at taking their own lives, sadly enough. Wow. More women try, more men succeed. And, and I think it's because we get to this point where we're just like, I can't do this anymore. And, it drives me because I know that there's a better way. And,
yeah. And you alluded to this, but we need each other. We need a brotherhood. Many men are isolated. So many men are on their own. And again, because we're trying to put this mask on, a masquerade like we're someone, and we're not willing to let our guard down to really connect with other men. Which is why, one of the ministries I was on staff with for a couple of years was CLC, stands for Christ-led Communities. And it is a men's relational discipleship ministry. It's one of the best ministries I know that takes the Christian education aspect that you see in church and the fellowship aspect, which are so often compartmentalized in church for some reason. Yeah. But it brings them together in a beautiful way and helps to facilitate masculine relationships in really deep ways. At the same time, you're being discipled and you're in scripture together. That was one of the first places I went when I was found out by my fiance at the time, like I said, with porn. The men's pastor at the time I went to, and he said, look, I got a group. I'm going to plug you into this group of guys. And it was the first time I'd been in a group of men who are being vulnerable, willing to share.
A novel concept, right?
I know. And it strengthened everybody in the group, including myself,
Yeah.
so yeah, we are not meant to be on an island. We need each other. And man, that's one of the biggest ways we gain strength for the journey and for the battles you talked about.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a good spot to land there. So, Mike, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of the book. We'll of course put this in the show notes, but how can everybody get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So, well, obviously the book is on Amazon. You can go there to get it. It's on pre-order. It's so weird. My publisher, it got pushed back, the release date, to April 4th.
Oh, Mike, that's a whole other discussion you and I could have.
I know. However, the interesting thing is I'm getting texts from friends saying, hey, we got it already. So you know what? You'll probably actually get it before April 4th. If you're, well, this is airing after April 4th, I guess.
Yeah.
But obviously Amazon, empoweredmanhood.com is my website. They can go to learn more about me, connect with me. I do have a YouTube channel, Empowered Manhood, and of course our podcast, Empowered Manhood. You can, I'm on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, but not as much. And the last thing is, the cool thing is about this book is if you get this book, it comes partnered with a digital course that's almost done being developed through Thinkific. So if you go to empoweredmanhood.thinkific.com, you can pre-enroll in the course. And basically it's me kind of walking you through chapter by chapter through the book, helping to apply the content, and then also pointing you to amazing resources that I've found in my own journey. Because like you said, we want this to be actionable. And I wanted this book to be actionable, easy for guy to read. And I don't know if you're gonna have video, but this is, the guys on the podcast can't see this, but it's a very thin book, guys. This is very accessible. That was on purpose. I fought my publisher to keep this book under 30,000 words because I wanted a guy to pick this thing up and feel like, oh, I can read this.
It's doable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very doable. Some guys read it in an afternoon, but the course is a companion to it to help you take steps right away. Very practical, very actionable.
Well, yeah, we're going to have a discussion on that so you can tell me how to do that. And
good, man. I love it.
Include that guy with my upcoming book. Mike, awesome having you on the podcast. I really appreciate your insight. Good luck with the book and your podcast, and really had a blast today. So it was good having you on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike, for allowing me to be here, man. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to following you, hopefully staying in a relationship and maybe partnering together on some things.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Take care.